Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Impact Funding Online Summit. Yet another interesting discussion lined up, and we have a very special guest today. He's the founder and president, and also the CEO of Bharat Light and Power. Bharat Light and Power is a clean power generation company. He's someone who's has 18 years of global finance and experience, which is gained in various roles held in France, England, Hong Kong, India, USA. Majority of which is 14 years, were at General Electric. He's the former president and CEO of General Electric in India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. So he was leading the GE India. In 2008, he was named by Business Today as one of the India's hottest young executives. He's been involved in various industry bodies. He has been a member of the National Council for CII. He has been the chairman of American Chamber of Commerce in India. He's been on board of directors of various things, including US India Business Council. And he is also a participant of Young President organization, that is YPO and Cornell University. He's also an Aspen Institute Fellow, and he's been part of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, and also the World Economic Forum Young Global Leaders thing. And he's been also the co-chair of WFGFC on energy. So let's welcome Tejpreet Chopra.
Thanks very much, Vishal. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure to have you, sir, here. TP, I think it's very, very interesting. So I think for the audience, we are going to talk about entrepreneurship, the Renewable Energy Agenda in India, and how technology is driving the green revolution, because I think it's very relevant in today's times. And specifically for our summit, we were looking at something where we can focus on sustainability, how we can talk about different aspects of this thing, which is what the SDGs and everyone is talking about. So let's start with TP with a simple thing, because I think you have a long, illustrious career with GE. You have been across the globe and then transition yourself from corporate environment to entrepreneur role. So how has been your journey and the transition from corporate as a corporate leader to an entrepreneur?
Great. No, thanks very much, Vishal, for having me on the show, and I really appreciate it and happy to share my journey. Let me just share with you, I've had the good fortune of actually being able to see both sides of the hill. One is the perspective of a large corporate, and one is as an entrepreneur. So let me just share that whole experience with three little stories, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
The first story is it's all about the people. The second story is take the job that nobody else wants. And the third story is follow your heart. So let me just share with you my big takeaways in terms of these three things. So I started out my career in GE Capital in a small little business in the big world of GE called GE Capital Aviation Services. Mm-hmm. And GE owns about roughly 10% of the world's planes, about 2,500 planes. And we were a group of about 200 of us that would travel around the world to finance and lease aircraft to every airline in the world. So it was a fun business for someone who had just come out of business school. Every day of my life, I'd be waking up in a new city somewhere in the world, sometimes in Hong Kong, sometimes in Sydney, the next day in Moscow. And that's all we would do is travel around the world putting deals together. But what I realized is in a very short period of time, that business grew from about 8 billion assets to about 45 billion assets. And it was literally the same 200 people. So that's my big takeaway in life, was the success of that little business to grow so rapidly and so successfully in a very short period of time, when I look back, was because it's all about the people, the attitude, the passion, the way we all worked every day. We would work 24 hours a day, day and night, because we were one team spread out in different parts of the world. And that's really what made us really, create that magic every day of our lives. So my first learning is that for any success of any corporation, doesn't matter if it's small or big, it's all about the people. So the ability of that organization to attract the right people, retain the right people, and grow your talent, that's what makes magic happen in any organization. So that's number one. The second big learning is take the job that nobody else wants. So I was having this incredible career at GCAS, which is aviation services, which was part of GE Capital. And one day I was pulled out of there, and I was told by my boss to go and run GE Capital in India. And I thought to myself, GE Capital was going through a little bit of a difficult patch. And a lot of people had come and gone. We had some problems in the business, and a lot of people, there was a lot of churn, a lot of people coming and going. So not many people wanted that job. So I was asked to take that job, and I thought long and hard that I was having an incredible time in the business I was in. I figured, why take another risky job? And I just carry on doing what I'm doing. But eventually, the vice chairman of GE called me up and said, listen, TP, I think I want you to go and take this job. And if the vice chairman of a corporation calls you up and asks you to do something, you don't have too many options in life. Either you take the job. If you don't, you might as well leave, or you might as well just stay where you are for the rest of your life. So I finally took that job. It was a difficult period of time because there was a lot of people coming and going. Our business had slowed down. But I must say, going back to my first point, that we were able to get the right kinds of people. We struggled for about 6 months, and slowly things started picking up again. We got the business back on track, and we grew it successfully. So as soon as things started moving along, things started getting better. I got another call from the then chairman of GE saying they wanted me to become the CEO of all of GE's operations in India. And looking back again, I think the reason I got that job was because I took the job that nobody else wanted. So in a corporate environment, when you're chugging along, you're happy in your existing job, things are moving well. At some points in time, right, you only stand out of the crowd when you end up taking the challenge that nobody else wants, or taking up a really difficult proposition that nobody else wants to take. And that's what helps really gives you that opportunity to take the next step of life, or that's when somebody else opens the door to move on to the next step in life. So my second lesson is, take the job that nobody else wants. And that leads me to my third story, follow your heart. I'd been with GE for nearly close to 15 years. I'd had the most incredible opportunity, learning a lot, working with some of the most incredible people I'd ever come across with. Running GE in India was an incredible learning opportunity because one got to see the wide breadth of manufacturing that GE is in. One got to interacting with a lot of people in government. One got to learning from some of the best research and development people around the world. And I just figured it was time to give back to the country. And the area that I was passionate about was clean energy. And 7-8 years ago, the whole clean energy and sustainability theme was just about picking up. And I just figured this is the time to give back. So I had a crazy lunch with my then ex-boss, Jack Welch, in his home in Boston. And we spent about a couple of hours together having a lunch together. And he asked me at the end of this 2-hour lunch, he says, what do you want to do in life? So I said, Jack, I love GE. I've been here, nearly 15 years. It's been a fantastic run. But at some point in time, I feel I want to give back. So he asked me what I wanted to do. And I shared with him that I was really passionate about clean energy and the fact that at that point in time in our country, hundreds of millions of people didn't have access to energy. And I said, I want to do something about it. And he says, why aren't you doing something about it? So I hummed and hawed, and I said, listen, I love what I do, and, I'm not sure. And Jack points to me like this and says, I'll tell you what your problem is. I said, what's that? He said, you're scared to lose your job. So I said, no, I'm not scared. I know, I'm not scared at all. He says, you are scared to lose your job. And he said, what are you scared about? He said, why can't you follow your heart and do what you want to do? So I heard Jack out. I came out of lunch that day, and I thought to myself, I truly am scared. I was leading this incredible life, which was unreal. You're flying around in the clouds, and you didn't know, you don't want to take that leap of faith to become an entrepreneur. But eventually, I also thought that if I didn't do it then, I never would. So I pulled the plug in my corporate life and decided to start life again as an entrepreneur, to do something about giving access to electricity to people around the world, and especially in our India, and also to make sure to help in that whole transition from going from a thermal energy country to more of a clean energy country. So that's what I did. I pulled the plug, started out with a few people literally at home, and over time the company has grown today into 2 big divisions. In clean energy, we built 2 large companies in wind and solar. We sold 2 of them. And today we have 2 other companies, one focused on building and owning and operating solar farms in the C&I space, and a separate one focused on industrial AI, doing enterprise AI solutions for companies around the world to drive digital transformation and productivity. So that's what we have right now. So that's my last and third story, Vishal, that at times in life you reach a point where you've just got to follow your heart and do what you want to do. Life's really short if you think about it. We don't have much time on this earth, and you've got to take advantage of it. And therefore, you've got to follow your heart, what you're passionate about, and do it very quickly. It's tough, it's not easy, but if you're passionate, things do work out.
Oh, so true. I think you spoke in terms of people, knowing the people well, in terms of being scared and following your heart. I think it's so true for all the people who's taking this plunge. Be it for social enterprises or anything else in terms of doing this thing, it is very difficult for us to kind of take that plunge. And once you go there, I think it's if you're passionate, it is what happens. So I think those are very interesting lessons, and it is something which I'm sure everybody in the audience who has jumped into even the social development sector and doing that and who are really passionate will really connect with. Moving on to, I think, the current space that you're working in, and it's also a very difficult space to kind of work, where you have to balance different things, which is the supply, the generation, the kind of sustainability or the efficiency of things around, because it is at a big scale. And I think India put out a very big renewable energy agenda, which is like meeting 175 gigawatt, this thing. So how is the renewable energy and energy agenda shaping up in India, and what will be BLP's approach and solution to meet India's need for this energy at scale? Because we have hundreds of millions of households which still don't have access to electricity.
Yeah. No, I think, Vishal, that's a good question. The world has changed dramatically over the last 7, 8 years. And I tell everybody, I think the train has left the station. It is very clear that the world knows the impact of climate change, of carbon emissions in the world, and it is really a big issue. We've seen it right across the world. You see the pollution that we lived in Delhi, over the last few years, especially September, October timeframe. Things are really bad. So I think climate change is here, and therefore we need to do something. I must say, in our country, in India, we've done a fabulous job in making that transition happen. The great thing that we did was, one, the government put a really good framework in place in terms of driving and setting an agenda in terms of the targets of what we need to do in renewable energy. I have to give full credit to industry that we followed suit and actually were able to attract large sums of capital to deploy capital to go and build wind and solar farms to help in the transition from a largely steam and thermal energy focused energy sector to one with clean energy, basically driven by wind and solar. So I think that transition has happened phenomenally well, and therefore I think today the targets and the capacity that we've reached in our country today, if somebody had told me we would have such a huge installed base 7, 8 years ago, I didn't think it would be possible. So I think the whole world has changed, and the sector has attracted a lot of capital. I think one or two challenges I do see now is the fact that I do tell everybody that at the end of the day, economics drives capital, and if the capital that has to come into a certain sector, if that capital does not get the required returns, it becomes more challenging. So we've got to keep on ensuring that as we develop the scale, the sector gets the kind of return we need to drive attracting increased capital into the sector. That's number one. Number two is technology. I think the fantastic part about this sector is that the focus on technology innovation that's happening, whether it's in storage and hybrid, that still has some ways to go. And it's really super exciting to see the kind of things that are happening in the space. I'll give you a good example. In my own home out here in Delhi, 1 month I got an electricity bill of close to about 70,000 rupees. And I said, I can't carry on like this, paying such high amounts in terms of electricity costs. So what did I do? I put up solar panels on my roof. And as a result of that, and these are very high generation bifacial panels, as a result of that, my solar energy every month, my electricity bills every month have come down to close to zero. So I think about it, if everybody in this country starts putting solar solutions on their roof and not only consume energy but produce energy, we could transform the way energy is consumed and clean energy is consumed around the way. Going forward, I think over time, the cost of storage will also come down to a point where tomorrow I could put storage and go completely off grid and therefore become really self-sustainable in terms of energy. So I think there's going to be a lot of change in the world of energy going forward, both in terms of generation, in terms of consumption. I think going forward, the next big transition is going to be more on the consumption side, on how do we use technology in terms of AI and IoT to drive optimization on the consumption side as well. In our business, what we're trying to do is on the technology side, use our AI technologies to drive energy efficiency in terms of consumption as well, whether it's in factories or buildings, especially in energy intensive industries like in fertilizers or aluminum or steel, sugar, which consume a lot of electricity, or even in commercial buildings, we have the ability to put sensors in HVACs and chillers to drive energy efficiency. So I think, Vishal, these years, everybody's been focusing on the generation side. I think going forward, the shift is going to be now in terms of driving energy efficiency on the consumption side as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important this thing in terms of consumption. I think when you talk of efficiency and technology being there now, and which is driving a lot of change within this sector. So how do you see AI, data, and there's one is in terms of efficiency, second is about being able to predict things. So how do you see AI and IoT specifically shaping up and driving this area?
Vishal, over the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to a lot of senior executives and CEOs for large manufacturing companies in Europe and the United States. And I think if you think about it, fundamentally a couple of things have happened in this whole last few weeks of a lockdown. Manufacturing supply chains are broken, and I think large corporations have realized that they have an over-dependency on China in terms of supply chain. A lot of companies have faced that. And therefore, I think there's going to be a huge transition in terms of the way manufacturing is done, in terms of flexible manufacturing, nearshoring, etc. One of the key areas that is going to drive productivity is the evolution of usage of digitalization, AI, and IoT in manufacturing and industries. Let me share with you a few examples, Vishal. We were investing large sums of money in building wind farms and solar farms across India. But what I found is, even at GE, we used to make all these turbines, is that machines don't always perform the way they're supposed to. And what I would find in some of my turbines is sometimes the failure of the smallest component of even something as small as a $100 battery would shut down a $2 million turbine. And one day, one of my turbines burnt down to ashes. And that's when I realized that the way we maintain assets and turbines historically can't be the way we do it going forward if we have to improve productivity and reliability of our turbines going forward. So what we did was we put little sensors and gateways into our turbines. We created a platform, it's called Orion, where we started monitoring hundreds of tags of data from all our wind turbines onto our cloud and onto our platform. And we created a large team of data scientists that wrote algorithms so that we could predict failures in a gearbox, a generator, a bearing, or a blade hundreds of hours before the actual turbine shuts down. And as a result of that, we were able to reduce maintenance costs. We were able to improve uptime and improve reliability of the turbines. And we saw a huge improvement in returns on investment. And over time now, what we do is we've been able to connect turbines, wind farms, and solar farms in all parts of the world across Europe from our control center in Bangalore, where we're able to do these predictive intelligence for turbines around the world. So that's a good example of how we used AI in the renewable energy space to improve efficiencies and uptime. But over the last couple of weeks, given the situation with Corona, and over the last couple of years, actually, we've started driving the learnings in algorithms, in asset health and predictive maintenance for wind turbines across different machines and different industries. So as a result of that, I talked about energy efficiency, but we've also done that in terms of asset health and predictive maintenance in finding, for example, railway wagons. We can now track where railway wagons go and predict failures in railway wagons, all the way through to the steel industry in optimizing blast furnaces or smelting plants. How do we improve fuel burn for the blast furnace using AI? In terms of the auto industry, how do we track and trace components and tooling and material on a factory floor and optimize the man, material, machine as all three of them come together. How do you drive operational efficiencies in manufacturing? We've done that for one of the largest airlines in the world to track and trace all their goods at all their machines at various airports to help turnaround times of aircraft. So the world of AI and IoT really is going to transform manufacturing productivity, operational efficiencies around the world. Let me just quickly also share with you, Vishala, we've adapted technology just to show you in this Corona world, in the here and now situation, what we've sort of done. So a lot of large companies then came to us and said, listen, we need to figure out a way to help industry come back to normalcy, help keep workforce safe, and ensure business continuity. How do we make sure that if a few people end up with Corona or get Corona, how do we make sure that everybody else does not get affected? So in fact, one of the largest FMCG companies also came to us, one of the largest in the world, and said, we've got over 80,000 people in our part of the world. How do we keep them safe? So what we did was very quickly, given the fact that we had all these technologies with us, adapted it to come up with 3 new technologies. The first one is, what we do is we connect any camera that exists on a factory floor or in any place, and you don't need any new investment. We connect those cameras to our computer systems on the cloud, and using computer vision models and mathematical models, we are able to send out alerts when social distancing is breached. And therefore, we can warn people when social distancing is breached to ensure that there are no hotspots created on factory floors. And we're doing it now not only in factories in India, but in some airports and in factories around the world. So not only can we do that, we also do that for safety gear. We can send out alerts to safety officers when people are not wearing helmets or safety gears, or even with masks. So when people are coming into the factories, we can detect if people are wearing masks, and if they're not, we send out alerts. So that's number one. Number two, Vishal, what we've done is come out with a unique technology to make cell phones communicate with each other. So a lot of these companies wanted really frugal solutions, and we needed to find solutions not only for small companies that have very, very small turnovers all the way through to very large multinationals. So we came up with an ability for cell phones to communicate with each other, and when 2 cell phones come within 2 meters, both of them vibrate and send out an alarm. So it's a very active defense system rather than a passive defense system. So not only do we do that, then some of these companies want to know, is there a way to create an early warning system so that we can detect if somebody's getting alert, if somebody's getting sick, take him out of the production line. So what we're able to do with this system is not only to do social distancing, but now we are tracking the temperature for 80,000 people every 3 hours, so that if one person starts getting an early sign that they're getting temperature, he's taken out of the production line. But not only that, we can do contact tracing then within the 4 walls of the factory and find out who else came across the person, and all the other guys can be protected as well. So there's a huge amount of technology innovation happening in a time of crisis to keep people safe. The third thing we try to do, Vishal, is also to see whether we can use wearable devices. So we've embedded little chips into a little bit of a Fitbit or an ID card, so that when 2 ID cards get very close, it sends out a buzzing where you feel a vibration to warn people for social distancing. But all these technologies, therefore, go back to really driving not only these keep safe technologies today for the Corona period, but going forward, these technologies can be applied for driving efficiencies as well in terms of productivity. So I think it's an exciting time that I think today going forward, Vishal, to your question, that these technologies are going to be used not only for the here and now to keep people safe, but also going forward to drive industrial productivity, operational excellence going forward as well.
Yeah, okay. I think it's very, very interesting how you actually, BLP has gone about it. One, you have actually used technology to solve the critical problem of maintenance, prediction within that, and then applied it to different industries altogether. And I think I'm a big fan. I used to lead a AI machine learning practice before I jumped into my current role. And we were talking, when I moved out, we were in the forum here in some of the conferences talking about Industry 4.0 and how do you use data now to really drive that and kind of move the manufacturing others to a different thing. And it's lovely to see in the times that we are in, and that is the same technology helping us fight COVID and just not do a simple social distancing, we're going much ahead. I think those are really innovative solutions and really the need of the hour right now in terms of where we are. And I think it's DLP is really leading the way in terms of doing that, right from small manufacturers to big. So great to hear about that. Just coming back to our the energy renewable listing. You have been on the YBL, you have been a Aspen Fellow, and you've been also a co-chair as part of the WBL. I think it's the GFC on energy, which is basically looking at the global agenda around energy. So what is your global view or views in terms of energy sector working globally right now?
Yeah, no, I think, Vishal, we're at a very interesting time in the world of energy. I think there's going to be a massive transition that's going to happen. Who the hell thought during the time of Corona we're going to see oil and gas prices touch close to zero, even though it was just for a few days? And therefore, I think it's going to be very exciting for a couple of reasons. One is on the whole energy generation side, and I think we talked about the whole transition from thermal to clean energy. So that's one big transition. But what's interesting is the whole ecosystem that's being impacted as we go along, because not only are people thinking just about the energy one, which is the more obvious one, but there's a whole ecosystem in terms of automotive, transportation. There's the whole world around mobility. There's the world around storage. So I think the whole shift in terms of the energy transition is happening not only in this space, but it's going to happen across a multiple number of areas. But I think the world needs to do more. I don't think the transition has happened enough. There's still a lot more to be done. There are technologies in heat pump technology that's coming in. There's a lot of technology that's required for cooling. People don't think about it. But one of the biggest energy guzzlers is cooling. When you go to the Middle East and you see the kind of district cooling that they're doing in Abu Dhabi for a whole number of buildings in a full district, the efficiencies you get in district cooling is very high. So I think there's a lot of areas, Vishal, not only in, like I talked about, how do we use AI and IoT in driving energy efficiency and consumption, but also in terms of district cooling, district heating, in terms of mobility, you're seeing what's happening with all the electric vehicles, in terms of the whole infrastructure with electric mobility, in terms of storage. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the innovation happening, whether it's going to be about hydrogen. Everybody's talking about hydrogen in terms of storage. I've driven a few hydrogen cars, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all maps out with lithium ion on storage cars versus hydrogen in cars. The move with commercial vehicles. I think on the commercial vehicle space, they may not go down lithium ion, but they may use hydrogen as a fuel cells as a more sustainable source going forward. So I think it's a super exciting time, Vishal. There's a lot of innovation happening.
Yes.
A lot of investment happening. And I think we're lucky to be in a part where this transition is happening as we speak.
Yes, and I think it is an interesting time, and I think what we are looking at is COVID has been a trigger, and most people have been looking at it as a black swan event. But I think people like yourself and other companies have been looking at to convert into a green swan, where we're actually looking at it as a trigger, like the way you guys did with AI, and using it for actually making sure that manufacturing industry is still running and serving its purpose. I think it's amazing. And you also spoke about electric cars or electric vehicles, which is coming. And I think Delhi, where you're based, actually had a huge issue with clean air or pollution, right? And I know that you have been working with Impact Fund based in London. So could you talk or tell us a little about that initiative, how Impact, because I think Impact for the first time is really in focus. And I think NGOs and all the social venture organizations have been doing a lot, but now this is the time. So maybe if you could tell us about the initiative, what you have been doing, and how we can do more now.
No, thanks for that question, Vishal. I just feel quite passionate about this. And I tell everybody, I used to travel around the world and get into a lot of debate about climate change, etc. And people would, in the West would say the East is not investing enough, or we're not investing enough capital. But at the end of the day, Vishal, it comes down to a human level. At the end of the day, I tell everybody, when you come, we have in India, like all of us know, some of the most polluted cities in the world, right? And air pollution is a big challenge. If anybody's been in Delhi, usually in October, November timeframe, one understands how bad the air pollution quality is, and I just think that it's not fair for us and for our children to be breathing this kind of air, which is not, and the health impact it's going to have. It's not only about not breathing clean air. The health impact it's going to have is going to be so large, and the impact on productivity of people in the workforce and the economy is going to be so large that we need to do something. And for anybody who's been in Delhi, and I'm sure in some of the other cities, it's been one of the positive impacts of this whole Corona lockdown has been the huge improvement in the quality of air over the last couple of months during the lockdown.
Yes.
So a couple of years ago, I've been thinking that, listen, what can I do? And how in some way, how can I contribute to giving back and making an impact with regards to this? So another fellow YGL, a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, felt similarly about the problem, not only in India, but globally, and therefore started an impact fund called the Clean Air Fund. And she's raised a commitment of close to about $100 million to really put to projects around the world in terms of helping projects and countries and funding projects to help move the discussion around clean air and the impact on health. So she asked me to join as a board member, and I agreed only for the reason that I said this could be one potential way for me to actually make a difference in our country to help the cause. So as a result, we were able to open an office in India for the Clean Air Fund. It's headquartered in London, but we set up an office in India, and we've already started funding projects to help in this initiative. It's fantastic to see what the government is doing in this. The government's also deploying a lot of resources and energy to really make a difference in terms of clean air. But I think the problem is so large that all of us as citizens of the country need to do our little way to help in clean air. And I know we have a lot of challenges, but I really do believe that if all of us, not only in clean air and sanitation and a lot of other things, if we can play our little part in helping to move the agenda forward, I think the impact could be significant. So that's something, Vishal, I feel passionate about, that I think if we can do something and move the needle a little bit, we can make a big difference. But I also feel that in our country, we have the ability to come up with really frugal solutions. And that's one of the strengths we have, is that we are able to find new creative solutions. And if we can do these solutions here, we can take these solutions to other parts of the world. And that's one of the benefits of working with a global fund, is that we can learn with success stories in Bulgaria or China or in the UK and in other parts of the world, bring their technology, and similarly we can adapt our solutions in India and take it to other parts of the world to make a difference, because it is a global challenge and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. In fact, at Meraklis, what we're trying to do is also, I think, with one organization, one person, you can do only little. So if you come together, I think globally and as a whole, there's a lot more. I think we get people, like-minded organizations, the way I think the Clean Air Fund has come into India, and how you guys have really looked at to do in terms of thing. Although now, thanks to COVID, we could see Himalayas from miles across cities, this thing. So it was very interesting to see things moving around. But I think with what you are doing and TP, and what some of the global organizations are doing with the earlier goal of 2030, and I think what 2030 SDG goals in terms of sustainability and other aspects is amazing. And I think if we move right, we'll be able to kind of do that by 2030, or maybe a little later in terms of the COVID impact that we have today. So what we'll do here now, TP, is we'll probably take couple of questions from the audience, and see, I already see people have posted a few questions. Those of you who have posted questions, and if you can raise your hands, we can get you to the stage and give you an opportunity to ask that question yourself. Else I'll go and put it on your behalf to TP. Okay, so we'll just take a question till then, and TP, and then so I think this is from Mayur Parik. He's asking, what are the bottlenecks to manufacturing internationally competitive solar panels in India? how best to apply solar energy directly to home appliances like solar refrigerator, washing machine. I think you spoke about a little about home panels and the consumables earlier. So if you could just.
Yeah, I think with regards to manufacturing solar panels in India, and I think uh, I'll talk a little bit about the challenges manufacturers are going to face, and then specifically with solar panels. I think with regards to manufacturing, I think we in India have an incredible opportunity now to take advantage of the disruption that's happening in manufacturing supply chain in the near term. There's given the problems that a lot of global manufacturing companies are having, I think India could there is an opportunity for us, and I think we should figure out ways to really drive a more make in India approach to manufacturing. However, what I'll also say is that at the end of the day, I tell everybody that economics trumps emotion. Global supply chain is going to go to places where they can get the most competitive supply chain or product, and also if they can get predictability in supply chain, and that's very important for global supply chain, where you can get predictability of supply and it doesn't get hindered. So I think if we can get better at these two things, I think we can really become a really strong manufacturing powerhouse in the world. However, let me just highlight a couple of challenges as well. One of the big advantages China has is global scale. The scale at which they do manufacturing is so large that at times it becomes very difficult for us to compete in everything. And therefore, I think as a national strategy for manufacturing, I think a country like ours needs to pick its areas in which we can really become global leaders in manufacturing, like centers of excellence. Whether that becomes small car technology, I think in India we've got a real leadership position in small car technology in the world. Whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's in perfumes. So there are certain sectors where I think we have certain kinds of machinery, certain kinds of metals, steel. So we have a competitive advantage in certain sectors, and those are the ones I think we should focus on to really drive scale to become the best in the world. With regards to the specific question on solar panels, I think we can do it. We have the capabilities, but I sometimes do feel that competing with a country like China that's got about, I think maybe somewhere in the order of magnitude 70 to 80 gigawatts of manufacturing capacity, whereas in India, I think we have about 4 or 5. It does get difficult to compete with that scale. So I think we should do it as in terms of energy security. So we should do it from an energy security perspective to build more manufacturing in our country. But from a global perspective, to get down to the economic levels that the Chinese have been able to get purely because of scale is at times challenging. However, I do feel that in a lot of other sectors in the world, we can pick our centers of excellence and our competitive advantage and really drive manufacturing capabilities in those sectors. Let me just share 2 more points, Vishal, in the world of manufacturing. I think in India we should focus on. One's on R&D. I think one of the challenges over the last many years, we haven't invested enough in local R&D. Even in the auto sector, we've got a lot of technology from overseas, and we manufacture it out here. I think going forward, we can use a lot of the engineering capabilities around the world. If you go around the world, you'll see a lot of Indians in the US, in tier 1 software companies, manufacturing companies. Why can't we bring that? We have the capability, we have the strength. So why can't we build more R&D facilities to do more manufacturing in India? So that's one area that I think we can do more and focus more on. The second area is really around, in terms of manufacturing, is around raising the bar in terms of our skill sets of people. We produce a large number of engineers every year, but I think where we need to focus more on how do we take the level of implementation of these engineering skill sets from a practical perspective and raise that up a few notches. I think if we can improve the quality of engineering depth and skill sets we have, along with our R&D expertise, there's nothing holding us back in the Make in India programs to become a strong manufacturer of products for our own country and also for the world. Vishal, I think you're on mute.
Yes, sorry. Sorry, DP. There was some lag in the internet connection here. So I think, TP, you spoke about, I think, electric vehicles, and that's one area we can focus specifically. And I think that's a fantastic way to go about focusing and then scaling in that this thing. So there's the next question is around that, which is, one sec, it is from Ashish Dongre. Okay, so he's saying the third largest contributor to environment uh, pollution is in India, and what are your views on scaling clean energy vehicles in utilization, and what are the challenges you see, because there are multiple aspects to electric vehicles being viable, coming in there, and really.
Yeah, no, Vishal, it's a good question, and thanks for asking that question. In terms of electric vehicles, I think it's here to stay and it's going to happen. You see the valuation of Tesla. Tesla is today valued greater than all the other auto companies, I think, around the world. At least all the auto majors, US auto majors, Tesla is greater than all of them combined. So I think there's no doubt about it that the EVs are here to stay, and they will scale. The question really is the speed of scale and how quickly it gets adopted. And it's a little bit of a chicken and egg story. Do you build the infrastructure for EV, or do you first get the cars? So that's part of the challenge in terms of the business model for scaling EV. That's number one. Number two, I go back to economics. Today, the price difference between an ICE engine and an EV car is still fairly wide in the Indian context specifically. I'm not talking about the US markets are very different, but in the Indian context, the price gap is still very significant, and that fundamentally goes back to storage. Now, the challenge with storage costs, which a few years ago would have been around $400 a kilowatt hour, is now down to, I hear numbers between 175 to 250. But then there are all sorts of numbers and challenges of building scale. So I think we're absolutely on the right track. It will happen. The question is really the speed of adoption, the speed of scale, which will be driven by economics, will be driven by infrastructure. And I think that's what's really going to drive it. But there is no doubt that virtually all large corporations in the automotive sector, whether you're on the component side, whether you're the OEM side, are focusing on these technologies and starting to invest in it. So I think that's super exciting. The only other point I'll just sort of say is that this is a sector that we should very, very clearly focus and scale up in our country. When I see the scale at which the Chinese have developed their own storage technologies, specifically with EV, all the way from the raw materials all the way through to end products in terms of lithium-ion battery scale production, they've been able to develop the entire value chain of building all these lithium-ion or battery storage technologies. So I think that's one area that I think we should invest and develop core competencies in our own country, because I think I am sure the market is large enough going forward to really develop an end-to-end supply chain for our country. Initially, we may need to get some technology from overseas, but this is one area that I think we should focus on. In terms of adoption, Vishal, I think the initial adoption might happen more on two-wheelers for fleets, rather, and trucks and buses rather than passenger vehicles, because you have different limitations with that. But I think at least on the two-wheeler, three-wheeler side, I think those are much easier, low-hanging fruit to sort of get the message out there. And I know there's some good companies and good startups in that space coming out with some really very impressive technology. And I also think there'll be a lot of things on the large commercial vehicles for buses and trucks, especially on buses. Hydrogen fuel cell technology is being developed very, very quickly. I know a couple of companies in the world that have brought the cost price down fairly quickly. So I think that also should take off, in the next near future, in the next couple of years. So I think I'm quite excited about it, Vishal. So I think we have a bright future for that technology in India.
Yes, yes, TP. So I think you spoke about investment, and I think this sector definitely requires huge investment in areas to really get and make things at scale. But even when we focus at specific kind of verticals or that areas that we can grow. So the next question is from Dilip from ID Hive. So I think he said that he joined a little late, and he was looking at I think the clean air fund that you spoke about. And so he's saying, how do we look at building such a fund in India, which is in general in terms of different causes, or say if you want to do specific something in renewables, how do you build people together for this? Because I think in current times there are a lot of funds already coming together in these times, which are impact funds, impact investors looking to kind of do this. So what is your view, and how if someone out there wants to do this, how does he go about it?
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I think you're absolutely right, Vishal. First of all, the world is going from just about returns and making profit versus taking a more holistic approach of purpose, right? It's okay. I'm not saying returns and profits are a very, very critical element in terms of what we need to do, but we also need to start thinking about the impact on society, impact on stakeholders, and impact on a wider system of people, whether it's suppliers, vendors, society, just investors. So I think there's a very big shift around the world to deploy capital now where there's more impact, and not purely just to make money. So I think, therefore, if one is able to show a connect between not only the ability to deploy capital smartly in order to make a return, which is fundamental to deploying capital, but making sure that there is a bigger impact, whether it's in terms of sanitation, helping with keeping things clean, whether it's in terms of sustainability, whether it's in terms of net zero emissions, that can go a long way to get to start this out. So I really feel, starting anything out, Vishal, as an entrepreneur is a huge challenge. It's I joke with people, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's a roller coaster ride. It's a high day, a low day. You don't know where you're going. You don't know you're going into a place which you've never been before, and therefore it's not easy. And I think a lot of incredible entrepreneurs in our country who've done some incredible things, and I love to hear the passion that which they've succeeded, and I love to hear the war stories of how they've gone through that journey. So it's difficult, but I really do believe that, and I share this with all my friends, that if you have a vision, the means will follow. So if you have a clear vision that is what you want to do, that you want to make an impact, and you're able to clearly show that vision in terms of how you're going to achieve it, how you're going to get there, how you're going to make that impact, and what the purpose is of deploying that capital, I think you will be able to attract the right capital. And then obviously, in order to do that, you need the right team. So if you have the right vision, you get the right capital, you get the right team, and then you actually go and execute. So if you can make these three things happen, I think you can achieve anything in life.
Yeah, TP. And actually, one of our speakers earlier on the day one, Steve Jennings, was actually talking about this sector. And TP, what he said is, if you go after some of the challenges that the world is facing, which is climate change, air pollution, or you look at any of them, and you really put up a vision which is not short term, you're looking at 10 years or 20 years, this is what, and you want to start now. And I think even from a business perspective, because there's always this thing imbalance in terms of the return you're looking at and the social return or the community, this thing that you're looking at. And what he said was that each of this problem is not just $1 billion this thing, it's $1 trillion this thing that you're looking. It can be solved at scale and it really gives you a fantastic roadmap in terms of how do you go. And I think that's what all entrepreneurs should be looking at. So true. So our next question is from Mohammad Afroz from Bihar. I think he was talking about, about organizations like yourself and others. How can they work with rural youth and in terms of non-profit organizations? Because a lot of the solar farms are actually in areas where you can really engage with the local community. So how's your organization working on this, and how do we engage with rural youth to get this?
Yeah, no, I think it's an excellent question, Vishal, because to really have impact, it's not only about making large wind and solar farms, but it's also to try to have rural impact. And I know a few companies that have just focused on providing solar energy solutions, or just generally technology solutions focused on the rural sector. I think there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of work to be done in that space, and I think there's a lot one can do. I must at this point also, I think the government's done, I must give them credit, that in the last few years, they've actually done a lot in terms of energy accessibility. They've been able to connect to a large extent, bring the grid to a lot of the rural parts of our country. So at least the grid is beginning to start getting to rural parts of our country. But I still feel that there is more that we can do in terms of providing distributed energy solutions to these rural areas. So I would encourage everybody on this call, if they have even the slightest entrepreneurial mindset, to see if we can provide these distributed energy solutions, innovate and come up with new business models to actually provide these solutions. Whether I know the Rockefeller Foundation had done some work started a company to provide solar solutions to distributed to rural areas by providing an integrated power plant in a village. There are a few other companies, I know, startups that are focusing on that. I think each of them are very different business models. In other words, for a guy who's doing large-scale wind and solar for attaching into the grid is a very different business model from the person who's doing a distributed solar project in a small rural town or in a village. Nevertheless, I think they're both equally important. They are solutions we need. There's some very interesting solutions being done in Africa and Kenya and Nigeria that are doing a lot of distributed solar solutions. Vishal, a little earlier, somebody had even asked a question about the application of rural solar solutions, whether it is for things as small as, for recharging cell phones to TVs to small little devices. So I've seen some really innovative technologies out there as well, using small little solar panels to recharge devices. So there's a lot of stuff happening on that front. So I'd very much encourage people to see if they can find the right business model. That the reason I keep saying that, Vishal, is that any solution we do, whether it's impact investing, whether it's providing a solution to solve a certain challenge, we need to make it sustainable, because it's very difficult to scale if it's not sustainable. So that's the other point I'd sort of highlight to everybody, is that when they're doing all these solutions, see if you can find a way to scale and make it sustainable.
Yeah, in fact, TPV partnered for this event with the Clean Network, which is a network of like 300 or more entrepreneurs, which are solar or clean energy entrepreneurs across India. And so we are looking to partner with them and connect them with different investors in this thing. And how do we do? I think that's very important, because it's just not about large scale projects, but also about kind of small to medium grids, which can really serve the rural ecosystem. So I think Rajpal ji is saying, okay, there are already a lot of hybrid solutions in India, and he's been working on some of them, this thing. So yes, there's a lot of this thing going on in India. So I think just before we wrap up, what TP, I would love to know is, I think you have had a fabulous journey in GE, moving like amazing projects globally, and then you move to BLP to start on your own. I think it requires a lot of courage, especially when you jump the ship and starting something new. And I think it's been fabulous. I think the way BLP has gone about doing with the industry AI, which is the Orion program to run AI, to move into other things in terms of this thing. So what would be your advice to all the social entrepreneurs at the audience here? So if somebody wants to start something new, so how do they go about it? What is your advice, and how to look at it?
Yeah, no, Vishal, it's everybody has their own perspectives, and my perspective would be the following. One is, like I said to you in my story, follow your heart. I think if you're really passionate about wanting to give back, or do a new project, or be an entrepreneur, or, just do something different, absolutely go for it. You know what I mean? It's, don't worry about what other people say, because you can't worry about that. There will be naysayers. There'll be people who don't believe in your project. But I think you just got to go for it. If that's what you really believe in, that's one. My second thing would be is try to find other people to come and believe in your vision. because it's tough to do anything on your own, so you need to find the right other people to come along. But the most important thing is to find the other people who have the right attitude, who have the right passion, the way you have, who have the hunger in the belly, the way you have to go and execute. Because this journey of entrepreneurship is not for the faint-hearted. So you need people who really have that passion, who want to grind it out day and night, morning and night, to make something happen, to do something different. So I think it's to find the right kind of people to come along with you on that journey. And just the third point I would just say is you've got to be passionate and persevere, because there'll be a number of roadblocks that come along the way. But I think if you have that, focus to deliver and the focus to execute, and you have the right kind of people, and you have the right vision, then people will follow and the means will follow.
Yes, Steve, and I so relate to that because I've recently kind of quit. Now it's been 2 years I've jumped, and I remember the day I was going and this thing. I just couldn't sleep the overnight, as in it's very difficult to go and take that decision. But once you're here and you're doing things with the right passion, and I think I've been very blessed to have a small and lean team which is driving this, and it's really possible if you have passionate people. Because even with this conference, when we were starting, we were looking at like 30 leaders to come and speak, and it went to 90. And then we really need to work together and come as a team, which is really passionate, working like 3:30, 4 in the night and do that. So I think that's so true to be. And so I think we come to the end of this discussion. It has been a very amazing, this thing, very interesting, a lot of advice for people. I'm sure the audience must have loved it. I saw a lot of questions being put up there. So thank you so much. It has been a pleasure having you on Impact Funding Summit Online 2020. Thank you, and you have a great day.
Thanks, Vishal, for having me over. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and thanks to the audience as well. Thank you. Bye.
See you.